Welcome, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. This is Module 10 of the APR online study course. We're going to focus on the test, the examination. The first part of the examination is the panel presentation, and so we'll talk about that. Um, Primarily, we focus on RPI in this particular meeting because it frankly integrates all of the KSAs when you're working on communication planning. So that's this session. Some of you have heard, and we have announced that I am retiring, and this course is really dependent on me. I facilitate the course. We have lots of facilitators that are in the course on a day-to-day basis. I'm really responsible for this course. It's been an absolute pleasure to work with so many of you to get your APR, but it is time for me to step back, and it's going to PRSA. And they're not, and they've had 2 years warning, just so that you know. I did my due diligence to let them know this was happening. Uh, but they are not going to have the other course ready to go, and it will be different than this current course. This has been a sort of a labor of love, and it's been a great pleasure. And so we are going to be putting all of the videos that are for an entire year on YouTube, and they will be freely available. We're also going to have a Brainscape self paced or a spaced repetition flashcard group, and we will meet monthly. But that's really it. And so the course is going away, just so you know, and it's not a bad thing because life moves on, and we just wanted everybody to really know about all that. So, in terms of your focusing on your APR, do you have, and go ahead and put this in the text chat, do you have a target date for your panel presentation? Some of you have already completed your panel presentation. That's great. This meeting will be invaluable to you even if you have already completed your panel presentation. So some of you are looking at December, June, August. Some have already completed it. May, there's a lot of people in May and June. That's fantastic. The course is going to be there for you until August 15th. So even though we're finishing this spring cohort, you'll be able to stay in the course and use all the study materials, and frankly, contact me and have meetings with me all the way up until August 15th. At that point, the course goes away. So I really want to make sure that people are aware of that and how that's working. One thing that we really want to point out to you is if you've gotten to the place where you're about 75% complete, you've been doing the activities in the course and you've had those little green check marks after all of the activities, and you've gotten to that 75% complete, and you've done sort of what we call the milestone activities, which is 6.6, the case problem response, and the panel presentation practice. If you've done that, you'll see under, and you can see the activities in Module 10 here, you'll see under Module 10, it says course completion. There is a way to check your progress and also get a certificate. There are people who don't want the APR and just want to get a certificate. We can do that through that activity. And if you get your APR, we can give you a certificate with APR on it. So, speaking of APRs, we've got some great APRs. And I think each one of you went through the online study course. So we're really happy that you're all here. Let's start with Christina. Christina, give us a little introduction to yourself. Share just a little bit about the big question that I want to ask and I want people to talk about today is, when did you know you were ready to take the examination?
I'm a terrible person to ask that question to, Michael. So my name's Christina Baumgartner. I am on Long Island, in New York, for those of you who are not familiar with Long Island. I do public relations for a public school district. We have just under 6,000 students pre-K through 12. I've been there 10 years now. And before that, worked doing communications, PR, constituent outreach for elected officials for 10 years. So it's been a long journey. I don't know that I ever felt ready to take the exam or to do my panel. It was one of those things where I talked about it for a couple of years that I was going to do it. And then there was a moment I was at a conference and a couple of us said, that's it. We're getting pinned because I belong to the National School PR Association. They pin people every July at their conference who have earned their APR in the previous year. And we said, we're getting pinned at the conference next year and mailed in my materials. And then I said, oh God, I have a year to do this. So it turns out that was what I needed was to have that deadline in place.
Yeah, I mean the AP, public relations people more than anybody else, any other profession I know are really deadline driven. So if there isn't a deadline, and that's one of the reasons in the course we really ask people to put a target date for their examination to give you that extra push. How about you, Joel? What did you when did you feel ready? Did you just push yourself into it?
Yeah, good evening, everybody. Joel Fry, Memphis, Tennessee. Work for ALSAC, St. Jude. First of all, Michael, congratulations, man. I'm so happy for you. What a milestone. We're all shooting for where you are. I'm just going to say that. So enjoy these last 2 weeks and take it all in. But for me, much like Christina, I needed a deadline too, and my APR actually served as the capstone project for my master's program at the University of Memphis a year ago. So I was going into my last semester, and I had 3 more hours to complete, which was the capstone, and all that was between myself and getting my master's was the APR, and I'd been thinking about it as a capstone for about 3 years, and had been planting seeds for it leading up to the January of 2024. But right before the new year turned, I applied, and I basically took the semester January through April and did it all 1, 2, 3. And I was already sort of in that mindset, having been in grad school for a couple of years. So my level of focus was probably as high as it's been in a long time. And I cut it a little closer than I would have liked to. I was fortunate and passed the exam on the first try, but had I not, it might have interfered with my grad school plans. So if anyone wants to talk about that offline, let me know. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. How about you, Brad?
Yeah, and congratulations, Michael. Long time coming. The moment I knew I was ready to take it was when I was in the middle of preparing my panel presentation questionnaire. And as I was writing out the answers and pulling in both the real life examples and work that I had done, and then thinking about all the different things I had learned going through the online study course, reading the materials, going through the study guide, I went, aha, this stuff is sticking. I've got the momentum now. I know what I'm talking about. And this was the spring of 2020, and I had been I'd gone through the online study course for a year, was repeating it because I could do that, and I felt the repetition with the questions was important. And then when the world shut down, I had a lot of time on my hands and said, okay, enough is enough. Let's get this thing done. But it was that writing of the questionnaire that made me go, oh yeah, okay, I got it now. I got it. I'm in the home stretch of this. I feel like I can go that last mile, get ready for the test, put my panel presentation on, and then close this thing out.
Excellent. That's fantastic. And we're going to hear from the entire panel as we go through the presentations this evening. We do encourage people really, it happens so frequently that a chapter or an accreditation chair will say the first thing you do for your examination is the panel presentation. And unfortunately, that sort of stunts the growth of understanding the RPI process because they say, I don't need to study that because I've already done my panel presentation. If that is your case, I'm going to highly encourage you to make sure you do 6.6 because What happens is when you do the case problem response, you're thinking abstractly about all of those communication planning components. If you're doing a panel presentation, you're thinking about your budgets, you're thinking about your audiences, you're thinking about your boss, how your boss is going to hate this or not, whatever. That stuff should not be in your brain when you're working on putting together those planning components. So this activity is to do it abstractly. So Julie was in that situation. I believe, Julie, I'm going to go ahead and have you go ahead and share. Julie, I believe you already did your panel presentation, and I encouraged you to go back and do the case problem response. Is that correct?
That's right. And it was, I will say it was very helpful because it kind of connected the dots, which was really good.
Excellent. So why don't you go ahead and share your case presentation here. And I'm going to encourage everyone who's listening, and of course the panel's going to share with you some tweaks here and there to help really deepen your understanding of those planning components. But I'm going to encourage people who are listening in the chat, feel free to give Julie some collegial feedback. What that means is, and we always call this I'm going to say it out loud, a shit sandwich. It's you say something good, you give a little bit of something unpleasant, and then you say something good again. And so be collegial about what would you tell Julie if she brought this plan into you, and put that into the text chat, because that's going to help you understand these components even better. So Julie, go ahead and share your situation.
Well, now that's a pretty big buildup, Michael. Thank you. Be gentle. Do you advance or do I advance?
I did, and I'm sorry to interrupt you. I did actually, Julie also, I told Julie, don't go beyond the strategy. So she has pieces of the tactics and budget and timeline and things of that nature. So we're just looking at what we call the foundation of a communication plan. So go ahead, Jill. I'm sorry about that. That's
okay. Do I advance or do you?
I've got it.
Okay. Okay. So I chose the case study for Health Tech Labs because I'm in healthcare. So Health Tech is a large privately owned chemical research company. They have a solid track record in research, mainly in the areas of sewage treatment and water purification programs. They have a very positive, well-known reputation. The communications manager's done a good job of building that reputation, producing environmentally sound and socially aware solutions to problems. In this case, one of its smaller projects involves a 10-year study for a new medicine that could reverse the cause of type 1 diabetes, but it involves testing on chimpanzees and a small group of them. An animal activist group, ROAR, has indicated it plans to demonstrate the negative effects of research on animals in just over a month, and they do have a track record of generating coverage that could adversely impact your reputation. The president is concerned that this could not only negatively impact employees, it could unduly influence agencies and foundations that fund research programs. We need to get out in front of this situation and have a well-planned communication strategy that emphasizes the positive outcomes of this and other research performed by Health Tech, and either head off the protest or minimize impact. So again, I came at this from the standpoint of they were planning this in a month. So some of these tactics I had in mind that I had to take quick action. So from a research standpoint, that influenced it a bit. So I listed a few different things here. Fact finding, I would immediately gather data on internal practices, what protocols are required when working with animals in research, how risks are minimized when using animals, and make sure that I had a foundation of how we were practicing that I could speak to, and trying to be proactive and communicating the positive. I would also conduct a content analysis to look at recent media coverage of other protest scenarios to understand the ethical issues and audience sentiment behind using animals for research. I would conduct qualitative interviews pretty quickly, but with heads of research, QA, compliance, to understand how protocols are monitored, measured, and have the facts to speak about our practices. I attempt to do a competitive analysis to understand how other like research companies have dealt with this issue and communicated the positive benefits and outcomes from utilizing animals in a controlled manner with strict protocols. And I'd also conduct a risk assessment. Given that there is a potential crisis situation here, I'd want to make sure that health tech is in fact adhering to standards around welfare and doesn't have any issues I'm not unaware of that might reverse any of the positive impact that we're trying to achieve, and could derail the communication strategy. With time, I would also look for third-party research or secondary research that supports the use of animal testing to have for support for fact sheets and independent endorsement materials. So the problem statement is they have a positive track record for conducting a wide variety of research studies resulting in positive outcomes and solutions to major social problems such as water purification in developing countries. Some of the research does involve using animals in testing. While this is a long proven and widely successful research method used by many reputable research companies for decades, it can also draw the attention of organizations focused on animal rights. Proper education on the benefits of this type of research combined with demonstrated positive outcomes can help influence opinion and minimize any negative impact from social activist group activity. Next. So for our overall goal, it really would want to position health tech labs again as an industry leader that provides these sound and social aware solutions to global problems and using well-recognized and valid research methodologies with positive outcomes. Next. So for audiences, again, we'd want to focus on employees first. I didn't make note in the case study, but many of the employees weren't even aware of this research project. They're the first and most critical audience. They need to understand what's being done, how it's being done properly, and could also become loyal advocates of the company's work. You'll also want to be transparent about the potential of the protest and address any safety measures that you would take if required. I also indicated your board members are investors so that the transparency is key, and they can also become your advocates and be aware of potential risks. Much of the research is funded by federal and state decision makers. So they would be another target audience and build loyalty to maintain that positive relationship as they actively invest. They also rely on foundations. So we'd want to work with those who also help fund research projects. This audience can collaborate and lend credibility, support the scientific methodology and rationale, provide third-party endorsement, and alleviate uncertainty about continued funding for critical projects. I also cited the medical community here. They're prescribers of the outcomes of this kind of research. They can help to reinforce the critical need and the value of well-tested protocol to ensure its safety for patients and can provide real-world outcomes on the patient benefits, as well as the risk of not having a solution to this problem. I also indicated here that we could also look at other peer companies to help support this work as well as an option. So two objectives I listed here. One is increase awareness and understanding of the scientific and medical benefits of using animals in research by 30% among regulators and funding foundations as measured by pre and post campaign surveys, social media engagement, and website analytics. Within 3 months of this work, at least 40% of the employees will have greater awareness of the ethical practices, regulatory standards, and scientific benefits of using animals in research based on post-campaign surveys. Next. So strategies, focus first on defining our position and core messages on the ethical use of animals in targeted research, launch a proactive campaign to engage in transparent communication about the study and milestones, leverage our website, social media, mainstream media when appropriate. I'd utilize existing resources such as expert interviews, case studies, social media channels in collaboration with partner institutions and stakeholders. Look to partner with research advocacy organizations and use their experts as well to endorse this ethical use and the benefits of using animals for specific types of research. And prepare to launch an educated and thoughtful response should a protest also happen. Next. I put a few bullets in here about messaging as I continued in here. Essentially things like, we understand that people care deeply about the welfare of animals, and so do we. Engaging in humane treatment is central to how we conduct our research. So you're kind of getting at that acknowledgement. Our research protocols follow strict regulations and are monitored by ethics committees that include external experts to ensure validity. So that's the adherence to the ethical standards. The third is animal research has consistently played a critical role in developing life-saving drugs, vaccines, and therapies that have improved the health of individuals worldwide. So speaking to the broader positive outcome. And then just a commitment statement. We're committed to improving the quality of life for all through responsible and ethical research. Next. So again, I hit at a high level on tactics. I'm focusing on the two core audiences really here: engage employees in an education campaign to create greater awareness and advocacy. So I do that through town halls, virtual meetings, creating articles and FAQs for employee newsletters, potentially create an online form and email group to enable employees to ask questions and submit information as well about any emerging threats or activist activity that they may be hearing to stay on top of what's happening. And then I would launch an educational campaign for regulators and our other external audiences to create greater awareness and advocacy, holding some virtual meetings with those regulators and foundations to review our protocols and outcomes, develop email and mailed communications, create content for our corporate website on our practices, leverage third-party endorsements in support of that, invite members of research advocacy organizations for panel discussions if time, and expert interviews on animal-based research, offer facility tours if appropriate, and share published case studies as well. I think it got, again, costs, I didn't get into much detail here, but we'd have the production of materials, creation of content, any event-related costs, and of course, our staff time to put the plan together. And then I basically did a quick timeline here because of the time frame for the protest itself, and just had kind of week one would be to assemble the research and the crisis team. So we're working those in parallel. Prepare materials, update website, produce a message from the CEO or other videos, host the meetings, the calls, post videos and content online, and then conduct some follow-up, monitor, and prepare for any protest activity. And then as we get farther, depending on if there's a protest or not, would continue to assess awareness improvement through surveys, monitor media coverage, and sentiment analysis.
Okay, great. Great job. And well, I'm going to give a introductory response here. We have about 4 minutes, 4 to 5 minutes to chew on this. I'm happy to go back in the slides if you need to talk about any particular slide. The other point I really want to say is, oftentimes when we talk critically about a communication plan like this, the truth is it's an excellent plan. Most public relations people, if you compared most public relations people, it's excellent. The APR takes it just that extra step. And so that's where we're going to talk, as we're talking at the top of that. So with that, I think I heard Brad say he's got something to say.
I didn't pipe up, but there were just two thoughts that come to mind, given that our crunch on time. And Joy mentioned this in the comments. There is a distinction between an audience and a public. An audience is somebody out there who might hear the message, who might be in the field of listening, that receives it, but a public has some kind of engagement, has some kind of skin in the game, and is the kind of public that you are engaged in, that you are attempting to move the needle in your objectives. The other thing to think about, and I look at when I see budget up there, kind of glossed over, but if you kind of get to what's the big picture of what APR is all about, it is about professionalizing the practice of public relations such that it makes processes, the things we do, measurable and replicable as part of the industry. And so that's why each of these pieces is important, because each of them is essentially an experiment. And if you think about the lens of a scientist, you need to know what all the variables are so that you can either avoid the results or replicate the results. And so understanding at a detailed level budget, a lot of people go, well, it's just staff time. No, that's something you spent. Time was spent on that. For me to understand, what does it take to get the results you have, to replicate and duplicate those? What are the resources I need to put into those things? So having that lens on your plan gives it a sort of a broader perspective of, if I handed it off to somebody and they had the exact same situation, could they repeat all the steps and get the same kind of outcomes?
Excellent. How about Christina? How about you?
I agree with everything that Brad just said. I also, I think you did a good job of laying out the objectives in a way that is sort of who does what by how much, by when. The one thing I would say is that once we got to the objectives, I noticed a lot of things in your objectives that you were going to use then in your evaluation that you didn't include in your research. So I would just keep in mind, some of these pieces that you have in here about the pre and post campaign surveys and looking at your social media metrics. Don't forget that those are also considered research pieces. That was something that kind of stood out when I was listening. Also, I think when we got to your tactics, you had sort of those two big bullet point tactics, and then underneath them, sort of the actual action items. And it felt as though, so like engaging employees in an education campaign felt a lot to me like a strategy. And then those were the tactics you were going to use to achieve that strategy. So maybe just taking a glance at, because I know this wasn't your panel presentation topic. So maybe just taking a glance before you take the exam at, strategy versus tactics. And, because I think this is something that could easily come up on an exam question.
Sure.
So just to make sure that you have that very solidified in your mind.
And
Excellent.
honestly,
Joel?
I didn't spend a lot. Sorry.
Yeah.
No, go ahead, Julie.
No, that was very helpful. I mean, I didn't really spend a ton of time here. At first, we had talked about just going through the objectives, but I felt like I needed to at least follow it through a little bit. But I agree with you.
Yeah.
Well, and you could even have strategy one and then have the tactics underneath that, which is a really helpful way to organize that. Joe, how about you,
Sure.
Joel?
Great job. Loved it. All the steps are there. I would maybe, my one bit of feedback, maybe think about the goal as the outcome. What is the greatest outcome that's going to come of this? And if there's anything that I learned going through this process, outcomes are greater than output. And so maybe just focus on that a little bit more at the top and make sure that the audience is clear on what that ultimate goal or outcome is. But this is textbook otherwise, in my opinion.
Great. And I mean, since this is my second to last meeting, I'm just going to anyone who actually heard Fern Bonamy speak. Fern Bonamy, she's now dead. She was over 100 years old when she died. But 20 years ago, when we put this course together, I worked with Fern a lot. And one thing she always talked about was laser focus on one thing. So the objectives have a lot of little stuff in there, and you might be this is just her recommendation, is you might really make sure you're focused on one thing happening. So like, for example, you have greater awareness of ethical practices, regulatory standards, and scientific benefits. Those all could be communicated in different ways, and some people will have different levels of each one of those. So when you group them all together, it kind of fuzzes it out a little bit. So you might say this is an ethical issue and problem, and just focus on that one thing. So that objective would be within 3 months, 40% of employees will be aware of the ethical practices, which really kind of just conks it on the head so that you're sure you get. And so that the other thing I'm going to mention is, in that same vein, the problem statement isn't in fact, go ahead and tell me, Julie, what was the problem? What is the problem?
Sorry. I was the problem is that if this organization protests, it could jeopardize future funding and projects and the reputation of the organization.
See, and to me, that's still sort of, and we have that exercise of the 5 whys of trying to really get down to what is the actual problem. I mean, and it's going to take longer for us to dig into that, but it may still be you're at symptom level. And the other thing is just spitting it out as one sentence, saying the problem is the protests are going to affect research funding.
Okay.
But then the five whys would say, why are they protesting? And then there may be in the community a lack of understanding of what the ethical practices are in dealing with animal research. And ultimately, that kind of gets closer to what your actual problem is. Now, if you only have a month, you're not going to be able to educate the community about ethical practice of animals. So you may not be able to focus on that specific problem in that short period of time. Excellent communication. Is there anything else we want to say before we go to the next one? All right. Great job, Julie. Let's go ahead and go to the next one. We've got another case problem response, and I'm really happy that we are looking at these case problem responses. And so we've got Mary here. Mary, are you there?
I am here. Thank you.
Okay. And you guys did a great job, and I'm talking to the people who are listening right now, of putting in comments in the chat window. And Julie, I encourage both of you not to look at the chat because it does throw you off in your presentation. I will send those comments to you so that you can see those comments later. So continue to think about, what would you say to Mary if she brought this communication plan to you? What would be your positives? What would be your things that could be improved? Because when you think that way, it improves your ability to think about how these communication plans are put together. So go ahead, Mary.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I worked on activity 6.6. Again, this was a case study that involved Ramsey Steel. Go ahead, Michael. Situation analysis. You're the PR manager for Ramsey Steel, which has a massive steel mill with 14 open hearth and 4 electric furnaces. The open hearth furnaces present major technical difficulties in collecting and controlling air emissions, which result in air pollution. Ramsey has long been aware of the potential pollution problem and made a policy decision to replace all the open hearth furnaces with electric furnaces of equal or greater capacity. The company has set a timetable for replacing the remaining 12 open hearth furnaces within 20 years and is committed to reducing emissions for its furnaces if a new technology becomes available during that period. There's an increasing volume of local publicity about air pollution, mostly slanted and inaccurate, in the daily press and over the broadcast media. Until recently, Ramsey has not been specifically mentioned in the publicity, but last month, Ramsey Steel was named Polluter of the Month by the county's Pollution Control Office. Much negative publicity followed. Ramsey's mill manager expresses concern about adverse effects the publicity may have on the company's future. Research that I had advocated for. One was content analysis of all media coverage of Ramsey Steel within the past 20 years. That I think would give a sense of the overall reputation of the company through positive and negative coverage. Also looking at air pollution information on the internet, media coverage, variety of areas to gather general facts on pollution in the area. And here I wanted to try to understand the climate of the area with regard to pollution. Are there other contributors that could be, causing issues in the location near Ramsey Steel? The third was thoroughly review Ramsey's history documents to uncover its ties and positive contributions to the local community, conduct in-person interviews with key personnel, past and present leadership to gather information and quotes. And I was trying with this to understand the type of neighbor Ramsey has been so that this information can be shared with stakeholders. And I was going to say there's a bit more. Review Ramsey's plan and commitment to mitigate pollution in the past and future. And as Julie had mentioned, this is really trying to understand the entirety of the plan so that may be shared with various stakeholders, being someone very knowledgeable on that plan from start to beginning. Research the economic impact of Ramsey on the local area through government documents, understanding the contribution that Ramsey has made to the economic wellness and growth of the area. Study demographics of the area through census information to understand the population. Age, length of residency, education level were some of the things I was particularly interested in. And this was really to understand the population so that we can create appropriate, relevant messaging about Ramsey Steel. As we know, folks of different age groups absorb information in different ways, have different, language preferences. So that was the goal with item 6. And item 7 was schedule focus groups of residents in the 2 municipalities adjacent to the plant and in the city in which it's located. And this was really to begin to understand the current public sentiment with regard to Ramsey Steel to determine positive and negative perceptions of residents. Again, we had this, bad press coverage or bad coverage about air pollution, but, how do the local folks really feel about Ramsey Steel as a neighbor, as a member of their, area? Problem statement. Due to recent publicity about pollution, Ramsey Steel is on the hook for contributing to pollution in the area. It's local and metropolitan. The company has not communicated the steps it has taken and its future plans to mitigate pollution, nor has it shared its positive impact on the community. The goal set forth is to position Ramsey Steel as a company with a history of and future commitment to being a good neighbor, contributing positively to the well-being of local residents and to the economic development of the area. And my goal really here was to not go at this from a defensive position with regard to the, number one pollution producer, but rather come at it from a positive vantage point, focusing on the good that the company brings to the area. Thank you, Michael. We were told in this activity to identify 5 audiences. The first, residents of the 2 municipalities near the plant. The second, residents of the metropolitan area in which the plant is located. The County Pollution Control Office, which I believe is the organization that called out Ramsey Steel. County commissioners who make decisions about, funding and, the availability or the support of the organization, support of the company, and then city council as well. The task for us, the message is that Ramsey Steel has a history of and future commitment to being a good neighbor, including a plan to mitigate pollution. We were told to focus on the, on one audience. So this is a short-term objective created for the residents of the 2 municipalities near the plant. Within 6 months, 50% of the residents of the 2 municipalities adjacent to the plan will be aware of Ramsey Steel's plan for mitigating pollution through a communications campaign. And then we were also asked to do a long-term objective. And that is within 1 year, 50% of the residents of the 2 municipalities adjacent to the plan will be aware of Ramsey Steel's history and positive contributions to the community through a communications campaign. And next slide. So I developed 2 strategies to address the short-term objective. The first was to identify and engage community leaders and influencers, including Ramsey Steel employees who lived in those municipalities, to promote the company's plan for mitigating pollution, to have those folks serve as ambassadors for the company and speak neighbor to neighbor about the company's commitment to mitigating pollution. And the second was using social media and traditional media to share the plan with the target audience. These 2 also somewhat address, I think, different audiences, different age groups, the in-person one-on-one conversations in the first part, and then the second part with social media and traditional media, perhaps, reaching out to a bit of a younger audience. And then 2 strategies for the long-term objective. Engage company employees to share the history and positive contributions of the organization, and use social media and traditional media to share positive contributions with the target audience. And again, similar to the short-term objectives, strategies are very, very much the same. Tactics for strategy 1, host a town hall to share Ramsey Steele's plan for pollution mitigation. Create a video presentation to be shared at the town hall and then later on social media that illustrates Ramsey Steele's plan for pollution mitigation. And the third was to write a press release to local papers to encourage a story on Ramsey Steele's plan for pollution mitigation. Tactics for strategy 2 was to develop a comprehensive history and community impact section on Ramsey Steele's website and include on there some of the quotes from key leaders, past and present, that we had collected during the research phase. Develop and lead a strong community involvement program that puts employees and leaders into the community doing community service, or however they could contribute to the well-being of the local community. And then promote that community involvement activities, including in the new website section through social media, traditional media, and paid advertising. So really building out the website and then referring back to it through some of the other tactics like social media and paid advertising, so that people begin to go to that website as a source of information on the company, on its contributions to the community, and also on its plans to mitigate pollution. The cost budget part of this was ideally, for this assignment, just very brief and didn't go into a lot of detail. So I will give that disclaimer right now. You have staff time for the short-term objective. You have refreshments at a town hall. You have the possibility of facility rent for a town hall unless you could hold it at the plant if you had an appropriate space. I think you'd have a takeaway marketing, maybe a one-sheeter that explains the plan that you would present to the folks that attend the town hall. And then you'd have the cost of video production. And I'm just going to assume that this would be with an outside partner. And the cost budget for the long-term objective, staff time to go through the history and gather the information, put things together, community involvement program incentives and rewards for employees that became involved in, community service and activities, photography costs for the website, and capturing community involvement program. Again, I'm assuming that there's not, a photographer on staff. You'd want to be capturing, when your employees were out in the community and when they were contributing to, different activities and plans. And then an advertising budget to promote the community involvement program. And I put that in there intentionally because I wanted to ensure that there was some guaranteed, coverage of the community involvement program, and that information would get out there to a wider audience. Timetable and task lists, as I just did this in a very simple fashion. Create the video presentation in months 1, 2, and 3. Host the town hall and share the video in month 3. Write the press release and including the video link in month 4. Develop the history and community impact on the website in months 1 through 6. Create the community involvement program in month 6, and this would be working with your HR department. And promote the community involvement program and the new website section after a year of work and on these activities. Evaluation opportunities, monitor public reaction to media coverage of the plan at month 4. Reconvene focus groups at the conclusion of the campaign to assess progress and awareness and opinion of the company and its mitigation efforts. Conduct in-person interviews with employees who are residents of the 2 municipalities at the conclusion of the campaign and gather some anecdotal or word of mouth response and reaction to the campaign. And also assess your social media efforts to measure engagement and to gauge response, positive and negative, to the social media efforts. Thank you very much.
Okay, great job. We've got some time to chew on some of these things. First of all, again, same thing that we said to Julie. It's a great plan. All we're doing is kind of looking at how would the APR look at this, how from an APR perspective. So let's maybe start with Christina at this point.
So I loved that you came at this from, I called it a reputation management perspective, as opposed to, sort of an, crisis reaction, I guess. I think that was a great way to approach this problem. And overall, I think you did a really good job of breaking this down by objective versus strategy versus tactic. And I really liked, because it's the way that my brain works, so it's how I usually formulate my plans, the way that you paired each one up with that. I always find that it's easier to sort of track when I have, here's my strategy and these are the tactics. Joy made a great point in the comments, that under the second strategy, that second tactic that you have about developing and leading a strong community involvement program, it starts to sound a little bit like a strategy within itself. So maybe just take a look at that one. And then with the evaluation, I know that you talked about doing those focus groups again. I would consider, when you're looking at a problem like this, given what your objectives were, to have 50%, maybe consider some kind of survey at some point, in order to maybe grab a larger sample size of that audience that you're trying to reach there, because I think that might give you a much better idea of whether you moved that needle to where you were trying to move it to, than simply doing focus groups where you're just going to have a smaller sample size. But otherwise, I thought this was a really great piece of work that you did.
Thank you. Thank you.
Excellent.
I was trying not to pay attention to the chat as it was.
No, I know. It's so hard sometimes to sort of make that balance, but I saw Joy make that point, and so I just wanted to sort of highlight that, because I thought that was a good point.
Yeah, and Mary and Julie, I will be sending you that chat, because it is helpful to kind of see just, I mean, you take it with a grain of salt, because, we're all, it's you're still the driver of the plan. Joel, how about you?
Yeah, I liked your goal, your outcome. Very simple. Basically, our reputation is not perceived, it's perceived poorly or bad right now. How do we turn that into good? So that's a simple narrative that I think your employees can rally around, your executive team can rally around, and it just gives you a nice sort of home base to go back to throughout the course of the campaign, as you start to unspool all of the different strategies, tactics, objectives that you outlined here. So I like that. The problem is, sometimes with a very simple goal or objective, you just kind of have to ask yourself sometimes, have we oversimplified it? Is there meat that we're not putting onto the bone that we need to go after? So just asking yourself that question throughout, even though this is a great baseline, would be one suggestion. But again, great work. I really think you've laid everything out here really, really nicely, and have set yourself up for success.
Thank you.
Great. How about you, Brad?
Yeah, a couple of notes here. I noticed both with this one and the previous one that the goals are framed as position, blah, 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 blah. And my APR study, I seem to recall that you want your goals to be a state of being. So in this case, not position Ramsey Steele, but Ramsey Steele is a good neighbor. That would be your goal. So just some thoughts. It's nuanced with what you have there, but just a way to think about those things. If you could go to the objective slide, Michael, and I thought about this when thinking about the other one too. Yes, this is a generally well-formed objective. I think connecting it to the larger business outcome to me is an important thing to do because okay, if we get 50% of the residents aware of the plan, and was there a second one there, Michael? The long-term objective. Okay, aware, like, okay, what does the awareness get us? Well, it's the license to operate, which means that Ramsey can continue to operate in this community doing what it does without being, without having a bad reputation, without having protests, and so I think it's important to keep that in mind. Yes, the objectives that we had there's a formula to them in constructing the how much and who and by what time, but also think about what is it we're trying to do here. Well, we're trying to stay in business and keep people, keep regulators, keep the local governments out of our necks so that we can continue to do business. So I think that's something. And I've been around these online study course long enough to know that when it comes to social media, there is a debate. Is it a tactic? Is it a strategy? And it all just depends. If your strategy is tell our story, then social media becomes a tactic as part of that. But there may be other instances in which social media actually becomes the strategy. And so I think just being able to talk through that nuance and justify it, depending on which bucket you want to put in, is an important thing to make a distinction of.
Thank you.
Great. There's a couple of Fern Bonamy talking in my head again that one thing that's really weird, and I'm going to say this, and I'm going to get Christine and Joel and Brad to help me out with this a little bit. One of the research issues was that there was some of the media coverage was sort of I can't remember where it was right now. There was media coverage that was erroneous, and do you remember where that was?
I think it was in the position, the situation.
Oh, it was in the situation. Here it is. Mostly slanted and
Yes.
inaccurate media coverage. There's many times we always say media is a channel of communication. Media is not a public. Media is not an audience. And if there is a journalist that is, like the star journalist of the TV station, and they're out to get polluters and they're not telling the story accurately, almost on purpose, there is a part of me that thinks you could actually target that particular, because that's a big problem. If there's the media coverage, it's mostly slanted and inaccurate, that may be that you actually spend time on those media people because maybe they've got an agenda or they're just looking for ratings or whatever. I don't know what they're doing. But I guess what I say is that I even heard Fern say at one point that media could be an audience if media specifically is the problem. And so that is something that to just kind of in the back of your head, keep thinking about. One other little teeny weeny little thing that, was that and again, I'm just repeating what Fern taught me, is that messaging grows out of strategy instead of this message is before you have an objective. And so logically, if you think about it, your objective is what you're focused on doing or you making happen. The message is how you make it happen. So it's part of the strategy, not part of the. So this message happens before your objective, and logically, you're going to, I think, you're going to want to have your message after strategy or in the strategy section. And feel free, Brad or Joel or Christina, let me know if I'm off base on any of that, because
no, I think you're exactly right. I would also say, and applying this to the previous one too, is messaging by public can be slightly different depending on what your outcomes are, depending on what their perspectives are.
Right.
And so I think it's important. You obviously have a core message, a core truth, but how you message that may be slightly variable. And I think that's important to note when you're putting together your plans.
Yeah, it'd be really cool almost to say, for audience X, this is the message. For audience Z, this is the message. Because they do hear things differently and think differently in terms of the audiences and the publics. And great job.
Yeah. Michael, I'm sorry. The one thing I will add on the media is, if you are going to target a specific reporter or media outlet, just make sure you do your homework first. I've had to do this in the past with a media outlet that we felt was slanted against us constantly. And we went into that conversation with a spreadsheet of every article that they had written about our organization over the last, probably, I think it was about a year. And we literally went through and created something that was replicable. And again, I know they talk about this in the materials when you're doing a media analysis, is make sure that when you do it, whoever's going to pick that up is able to replicate the steps that you followed and the criteria that you use to do that. So if you're going to talk about the media being part of or being one of your publics, especially make sure that you do your homework on what they have said, and come up with that really solid way to show that it is slanted one way or another.
Great. Excellent. Great conversation. We want to really point out to you that actually, I'm going to kind of skip that slide and that slide too, which shouldn't be there. And we're just going to continue on because I kind of messed up the slides. So one of the things that we did mention at the very beginning is there's an activity called Course Completion Certificate and Progress Check. We really want to make sure that you do that. It is after Module 10. So as you go through and do all of the activities after Module 10, this activity is here. And you can see that there's an examination tip sheet that we've kind of digested from all of the great feedback that we've gotten from people who have done the APR examination. That is in the examination tip sheet. So request that only after you get to 75% and do the milestone activities. Next week is my last week. And I have to tell you something. I've done this is over 20 years. I mean, Tuesday night for 20 years. And of course we have other facilitators that do, Joan and Patrick and Michelle and others have done this. But the truth is I've been living and breathing this for 20 years. And it's going to be a little bit of a swan song here, but look for PRSA to give you information on where the course goes. For those of you who are sort of on the fence, and I'm going to ask the panel to talk about this a little bit, they really get yourself motivated to take the examination, because sometimes people put it off too long. And so we really encourage you to study hard, but then pull the trigger and do it. So I want to also point out that we do have all those videos. And so go out there, you'll receive this as an email message, so you'll be able to click on it. Also, the spaced repetition cards, we will put you in there if you're continuing to study. So we won't drop you if you're continuing to study. And what I love about the spaced repetition cards, and Joel and Brad and Christina, I'm not sure we used those when you were in it, what I love about them is it has a Likert scale, and if you're really unfamiliar with something, it keeps coming back to you until over time you feel more comfortable with it, and then it gives you a mastery score out of all of the cards. And so this is better than Quizlet. And so please do take a look at that. So let's get that final word of wisdom from the group, and let's start with Joel.
Yeah, I waited about 3 weeks between panel and exam, and that felt really good. So I would encourage you, probably 4 to 6, no more than 8. When you're done with panel, it's going to be fresh. Study what you need to study, but don't wait too long, and know that if you don't pass it the first time, you'll have another chance to do it.
Great. And Brad, why don't you give us your sort of parting words of wisdom here?
Choose your hard. Your hard thing, you'll be at the end of your career going, boy, I really wish I could have done it. Or you buckle down, go out there and do it. We all did it. You can do it. The other people in here, it's not brain surgery. You put your note, study, do your panel presentation, be confident in what you're doing, and go out and close the deal.
There you go, Christina.
The one thing I always like to remind people about the panel in particular is that your panelists want you to pass. Everybody who has an APR wants there to be more APRs. Your panelists are not there to play gotcha or to find all of the holes in the work that you've done. So go in there confident that you have done the work, that you know what you're doing, and that your panelists are there to see you succeed.
Excellent. Really great, everybody. We're really happy that you're all here. Keep up the effort. We will see you next week. Last meeting. And enjoy yourself. Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you all for being with us tonight. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye. Great job, Michael. Best of luck to you, bro.
Much. Thank you so much, Joel. Thank you so
You
much,
are
Christina.
you are pumped, man. I'm excited for you. I can feel the excitement for where you're headed.
I have to tell you, I actually had a conversation today with my spouse, who is a little bit younger than I am. And I said, we need to start doing practice days on retirement, what it means to retire. Let's do like a practice day and say we're retired for this day. And what are we going to do for a day that we're retired? Anyhow, thank you so much. Bye-bye, everybody.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.